Hello, welcome back to the Holistic Homes podcast. I am Christine, your host, and I'm very excited about today's episode because this is an empowering episode. You are going to leave today actually feeling like you can speak up to your contractor, to your architect. I'm going to give you all the tools to do that. And I want you to know you are not crazy. I'm sure there's somebody in this healthy home building journey that has made you probably feel a little crazy. They might have rolled their eyes at you, or you might just feel a little bit defeated. But we're going to change that. So I want you to know that what you say is actually making a difference. And I'm going to show you some actual proof so that you don't stop speaking up. That is the biggest takeaway I want you to have, is do not stop speaking up for what you and your family need for your home and for your children's homes in the future. So a little bit of background. Let's take a little trip back to even just 10 years ago. There was this movement in the building industry of going with more formaldehyde-free products. And something that seems to not be fully understand is that much of the driving force in the building industry, and really the movement across all industries to use more greener products, less toxic materials, and just really focusing overall on our health, the driving force behind a lot of that change is not regulation, is not the government coming in and saying, you must change this, you must have your chemical level at such and such parts per million. It is you and everyone else speaking up and actually creating a demand for these better materials. Take produce even as an example. We now have this demand, which seems kind of crazy if you ask me. We have this demand for organic produce, for organic food on the shelves. There are now 2 different categories in the grocery store, where before, I guess if we go back far enough, everything was organic. And then things began to get sprayed with pesticides and more processed foods. And the reason that hasn't completely overtaken and been the only option is because of a demand. There was a demand for more organic and natural foods. That's one example. But as it relates to our homes and building healthier homes and the building industry, we can go back to even in 2015-ish, there was this shift in insulation, where insulation products began to be marketed and manufactured as low formaldehyde or no formaldehyde for fiberglass insulation. And Johns Manville was one of the very first manufacturers to do this. And it is not because the EPA came in and said, you must do this. Insulation must be formaldehyde-free. No, it was because there was a demand in the marketplace to have formaldehyde-free or low formaldehyde insulation. And once that began with Johns Manville, other manufacturers followed because there was a demand. So speak up and ask. The more that you are asking for these types of materials, or the more that you are asking about formaldehyde content, or is this toxic in my home, the more that there will be a supply for those types of materials. So formaldehyde was one. It wasn't because the EPA cared about our lungs. It really started to disappear almost from many insulation options because homeowners started asking questions. Now, the caveat to that is that formaldehyde is not completely gone in insulation. So although I want you to speak up and be your own advocate, I also want you to still have an awareness around what can be referred to as like greenwashing. We see it in the household product industry, the makeup industry. It's out there in just about every industry is this greenwashing term of natural, derived from fruits and vegetables. There is still very much greenwashing going on, even in the home building industry and building materials. So let's take a look at insulation. Like, there are EPA thresholds. It is very, very high. I think like over in the 250 grams per liter. It's very high. California actually has CARB, which is California Air Resource Board. They have even lower limits, and some other states have lower limits as well. But it is not zero VOC. That is not the threshold out there. And so when you are looking at paint, insulation, or other building materials, look at their safety data sheet to determine if it is actually zero VOC or if the threshold is just on the lower side. Same thing happened with the paint industry. You see a ton of low VOC, zero VOC paints. That is not entirely pushed by regulation. Sure, California, like I mentioned, does have lower limits, but they're not pushing for zero VOC. The zero VOC is coming from you speaking up and asking and demanding for those options. So all of the speaking up that homeowners and advocates have done over the years really pays off, but it wouldn't continue to pay off if manufacturers determined, hey, these products aren't actually selling. These products are just sitting on the shelves. Nobody's wanting them. They wouldn't be continuing to manufacture those products. So keep speaking up and also keep utilizing these cleaner options and resources, because the more that they are used, the more that they are purchased, the more that these manufacturers are going to be producing it. One really big example that I've even seen over the past 2 years is not even in the building material industry, it's in the home building industry, and in some cases with like production builders. They have begun marketing some housing communities that they are building as healthy buildings. Now, might not meet our standards at Holistic Homes for what a healthy home is, but there is this slow shift in housing, even in, I've seen it in low income housing. I've seen this push for like passive home, which is very airtight home building, but passive home building for low income housing has become more commonplace than it was even just 5 years ago. But passive home building, I've seen some production builders, which are builders that are building massive communities, production builders marketing their homes as green or low VOC because there is a demand for it. So that's what I really want you to understand, is that it shouldn't feel like pulling teeth to be able to build and have a healthy home. And don't wait and rely on regulation to come in to make that a requirement. A very good example of that is when we do have regulation in place, it still may not hit the mark. Very good example of that is building codes. I often talk about how building codes, yes, have evolved and developed and gotten much better over the years, but not when it comes to prioritizing occupant health. I think we can all agree that where we are today versus 100 years ago in the building industry, we have come significantly in way of structural integrity of our homes. They are built in a much more structurally sound way today than they were 100 years ago. That is due to regulation, especially here in California, our building code, due to seismic, which is earthquake concerns, we have really structurally sound homes. We do not have very watertight and healthy homes. So regulation can be helpful, but do not rely on that. I think many regulations across the board are considered a baseline standard. So building codes have helped and improved structural integrity. They have also come tremendously far in energy efficiency. That was also a big push, is insulate these homes, get more insulation. That did come with a bit of a downside when we really insulated the homes in the name of energy efficiency. But building codes are improving, but don't wait for regulation to make a change in the health of your home. So that's one piece, and I veered off a bit from talking about formaldehyde and VOCs. And then yes, building codes too. Those are a part of this regulation topic. So one way I want to encourage you is for you to understand you are not being difficult. You are being aware. You are setting the expectations for your home. And I reference this so often, is that home building should not be void of understanding that there is a unique need for each home that is built. We've gotten really far off track in production homes when they are just built from the ground up very quickly in 4 to 6 months, and we don't know the homeowner that will be living in that home. We don't know the unique health concerns, or if children have asthma, or if there's any prior mold toxicity within the family. So I think we should get completely away from just building homes for unknown families and really start to understand that homes are meant for families to live and thrive in, and that their unique subset of health concerns or priorities should be considered. So you are not being difficult when asking for better building materials that suit your family's needs. An example of this would be when it comes to insulation. Not all insulations are going to be suitable for all families. One example would be spray foam insulation. I talk a lot about my displeasure with the potential off-gassing and chemicals of spray foam. There are families that are living in spray foam homes that are having health consequences because of it. There are other families living in the same type of home that don't suffer those same health consequences. This was actually the case during Hurricane Katrina. When that happened, the FEMA came in and said, we gotta help all of these displaced families. And what happened is they ordered thousands of temporary trailers for families to live in temporarily. Well, temporarily turned into, in some cases, years. But what ended up happening is that these trailers were built so quick, and with the use of formaldehyde composite wood, so like OSB or plywood, and these families began to get sick even within the first year. So much so that testing began to happen in some of these trailers, and in some instances, these trailers showed levels of 100 times the EPA limit of formaldehyde, which resulted in numerous families getting sick. And then now they went down the next steps of there's big class action lawsuits because so many families got sick from the formaldehyde within these really tight, confined trailers. So point is that yes, families can be affected by these chemicals, and that you, being your advocate in the marketplace, should continue to speak up because it is making a difference. That is so important for you to know. You may feel like you are making just the smallest difference in your home that you are building, but I can tell you that there is a trickle effect happening. Even when we are consulting on a project, for the very first time, the architect or even the contractor may say, we've never heard about this healthy home need or concept. We're excited to learn about it. We want to be able to offer this to other clients. And we do exactly that. We are not only helping the homeowner achieve their healthy home goals, but we are strategizing with the architect and with the contractor about better building materials that still meet code and still meet performance requirements. But those contractors and architects go on to share that information with other clients. And in some cases, we have contractors that we worked with that make it their new standard. It is their new standard that every home that they build is now using low formaldehyde or no formaldehyde insulation because they have a new awareness around it. That is really what I see as the only path to making a meaningful difference for homes in the future. Because we are not going to ever get out of this cycle of mold inspections and mold remediations and costly building defect litigation. We're never going to get out of that cycle if we don't start building new homes now to better standards. And it's going to take a very long time. But instead of just fixing the issue when it arises, we need to be taking a proactive building approach, and speaking up is the best way to do that. Because unfortunately, in home building, it is not the same thing as getting burned. Like I have heard the term used before about if you are a child and you put your hand on a hot stove, you instantly feel the reaction and the consequence of that, and you know not to do that again. In home building, it is not putting your hand on the hot burning stove. It is building a home and finding out the consequences 5, 10, 15 years later. So change in the industry is going to feel like you are walking through mud because it is not happening instantly. So consequences in poor building materials or toxic building materials are not felt sometimes until 5, 10 years later. And then that's when the mold inspection and the remediation and the building defect litigation happens. And then there might be change. So you're looking at like 30 plus years for change to ever happen if we're not going to take a proactive approach. So that is really my take and encouragement for you to keep speaking up. So I've talked a little bit about really the regulation behind things like formaldehyde and VOCs, and really it's not a regulation demand. It's really you speaking up. So I'll give you a couple of questions that you can ask so that you can feel empowered, but also have the confidence in still speaking up. And these can be great, like when speaking with your builder. Sometimes I see you don't want to speak up because you don't want to feel like a jerk, or you don't want to feel like you're not trusting the contractor. But here's a couple of things that you can consider. You're not attacking your builder or making it contentious. You're building a home for your family and you are paying the bill. So you should absolutely have every right and reason to speak up and ask questions and ask for better building materials. And good contractors and good architects appreciate having informed clients. They truly do. So you can even ask things like, can you walk me through like these choices or these building materials or this insulation or this exterior wall assembly? Like, can you walk me through those choices or those materials that you always use and how they could affect my health, or how they could affect the water damage mitigation strategy that's really important to me. So just ask them to walk you through the potential pros and cons. And then you can also share, I'm not entirely comfortable with the standard XYZ. Are there healthier alternatives? Are there better performing alternatives? You can also share, I really encourage, if you have been affected by mold in the past or someone in your family has been, I really encourage you to share that story, because sometimes it can be helpful for architects, contractors, subcontractors to understand the why behind asking for different materials. You may not be entirely comfortable with that, but I encourage you to share as much as you are comfortable with, because that really helps them put like a personal connection behind the decision and hopefully deter them from feeling like, oh, they're just being difficult because they want to be difficult. No, it's very rarely the case that a homeowner is being difficult for the sake of being difficult. They are often asking for change because it is a need, and it is also, at the very least, a protection into their investment. So share the why behind why a particular choice or decision might be important to you and see what their response is. It should feel like a conversation and not like you are being steamrolled. So that is really my hope for you to take away today, is that for you to know that change happens from you. Change is not going to happen from regulation. And if it does, it's probably not going to be significant enough. And I also continue to encourage you to take the approach that we very much take on our consulting projects, is to be proactive, for everyone to understand that we are building in a way that we want to mitigate these risks and these toxic burdens and these potential for water intrusion. We want to be proactive. We don't want to have the home built and then determine if any of these issues are present. So speak up, be proactive, and have thoughtful conversations with your design and build team. That's the best way to really have change, is if you are actually communicating what your expectations are, and don't feel like you have to just take what the contractor is saying as the only option. It is their job to guide you. So I hope this was encouraging. I hope that you continue to speak up. I love hearing your stories when you send me messages on Instagram about, I had this conversation with my contractor. They had no clue what I was talking about, but they had said, wow, we've never heard a contractor, want to talk about insulation or have a concern about, this particular building material. So if you are having good conversations with your contractors and they are going in the right direction, I love to hear about those. So please reach out to me on Instagram, share with me how well your project is going. That is my hope for you. And we always include in the links below ways that you can work with us, ways that you can reach out to us on Instagram, send us a DM about your project, or you can head to our website and see how we might be able to consult on your project. That is really the best way for us to get integrated and be your advocate and your voice on your project. So I am so thankful for you being here and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.